Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. We welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. And a little later, we'll continue to meet the candidates for Lexington Mayor. Former Police Chief and Public Safety Commissioner Ronnie Baston will be here. He's making his first bid for elective office. Ronnie Baston shortly. But first, we want an update on how things are going at Bluegrass Airport, a major contributor to the economy in the region. Earlier this week, Allegiant Airlines announced a new destination from Bluegrass, and the airport already there has more than 250,000 passengers using Allegiant a year to and from Lexington. Bluegrass Airport has opened up a post-security retail bourbon store, and they're also obviously constantly reassessing security and customer service. Eric Frankel is Executive Director of the airport. He oversees all of its operations, and we welcome him back to Kentucky Newsmakers. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
And this announcement this week by Allegiant's what prompted our invitation to have you come back. Why does the discount carrier continue to grow its presence at Bluegrass Airport?
Well, we were particularly excited about this announcement from what we had understood, and there's a lot of folks in central Kentucky that really like the Destin-Fort Walton Beach area, and so we had been talking with Allegiant for quite some time about adding that service, and they listen. So they've had a very successful product here. They're going into their 10th year here in Lexington, and obviously they've expanded in Louisville and Cincinnati as well, but they really started in central Kentucky, and I think they're very happy with the performance, and obviously the passengers are happy.
Allegiant primarily serves vacation destinations. Obviously it researches what is likely to work. Do you assist them with their decisions when they're trying to plan what kind of flights they might add?
We certainly do. And it's a little more challenging with them because they go to a lot of destinations that are non-traditional perhaps, and so they don't have a lot of good marketing data, traveler data from historical perspective to draw on. They use a number of different methods with the Convention Visitors Bureau, both here in Lexington and also at the destination, and we try to assist them with anecdotal evidence as well when we pick it up. So they just have a different type of model completely than the other airlines, and but they obviously have a pretty successful product.
Seems to work, right?
Yeah.
What is your mix of business and pleasure travelers at Bluegrass Airport?
It's hard to tell from any point in time. I mean, obviously, depends on the season, or time of year, but we still think we're in the 70% business, 30% leisure. Obviously in the summer that'll probably go more 50-50 perhaps, but we think overall that's a pretty good metric for us.
What do the airlines expect from the airports?
Everything.
Really, I mean, is it obviously when they are out away from their hubs of operations? I mean, you pretty well have to deal with anything that comes up, right?
Fortunately, yeah. I mean, I'd say there's twofold. I mean, obviously they have their local staff, which they rely on, and they have those folks are really professionals, and they obviously do the best they can. But obviously the airport itself is what they expect. They want a clean, nice facility for their passengers, and obviously there are passengers too. So they have those kind of expectations. They want us to keep our costs down, be as efficient as possible, because in the end, they're going to pay to be here. And they want to make, like any other profit-driven business, they want to make a profit out of our market, and we think that they do. Aviation
has changed drastically, and just a few years ago, there were many more carriers than there are now, for example. But how tough is it, the competition for flights and service to an airport?
It is really challenging, and I know we've talked about this over the years when I've been on this show, and every year it seems to get a little bit more challenging. But when you have basically 4 airlines, United, American, Delta, and Southwest, have 85% of the entire market. Yes, there's a couple other niche carriers out there, but they're not really good fits for Lexington. So there's not a lot of options anymore. We think we need to focus on, first of all, retaining what we have. We have great service for our population size. We're blessed, honestly. We want to focus on retaining that. But certainly we'll work with those existing carriers to talk about new markets, just like we just did with Destin.
I know you, over the years, you have talked with Southwest, and they have told you that they consider Louisville to be the Lexington market, but they have also now added in Cincinnati. Does that get your attention, and do you try to get their attention based on that maybe you could handle a flight or two here?
Somewhat. I mean, this was kind of a strategic decision on their part, not having anything to do necessarily with Lexington or Central Kentucky. They moved their operation from Dayton to Cincinnati. So Unfortunately, that was very unfortunate for Dayton, obviously you can imagine, but that was they had a different strategy involved, and obviously the population in Cincinnati is so much greater, and even Louisville is so much greater than Lexington. It's really difficult for us to support the level of service that they want to have on day one. So.
Yeah, Delta seems to be ramping up its service in Cincinnati again. Is there a need, or is there any way that you respond to that?
Delta's, I think been a great carrier for Lexington historically, for sure. But they continue to evaluate markets. They started Minneapolis not too long ago. It was seasonal. Then they went year-round. Then they kind of went back to seasonal. They're kind of constantly tinkering around the edges with our market. We're a different market than Cincinnati. It's a different market than Louisville. We do have a lot of folks here that prefer to fly out of our airport, and they know that, so they try to accommodate that. But they have direct service to LaGuardia, direct service to DCA, Washington National, and obviously Atlanta and Minneapolis and Detroit, they serve us pretty well.
And you have to really hope that you can hit that sweet spot of places that people want to go and that you can fill those planes with. What would be on your wish list, though, of destinations if you could work with a carrier to provide it?
It seems like you ask me this on a regular basis.
And I think I remember before you said to the west.
And I think that's still true.
Yeah.
There's a couple destinations to the west we would love to pursue. And, we think we get closer. Even this Destin service, it probably took us a year with kind of cajoling and working with Allegiant before they finally announced. It just takes some time. But we feel like we have a gap to the west. We would love to see, Denver, Salt Lake, one of those type of destinations, and perhaps even, Vegas, of course, and, those type of situations. It's just tough. It's tough. You have to have the right aircraft, and then you have to have enough population to support the number of seats on that airplane.
Your job is tough because you have so many responsibilities that people may or may not be aware of. What do you do to be diligent about safety, certainly of your passengers, within the terminal, on the ground, on the runways, and so forth?
Well, thank you for saying that. I would say this. As much as we as a community, we always talk about air service and the airline serving our community, we do not lose track of our #1 goal, and that is safety. We have 24-hour operation every single day of the year that we are trying to comply with the latest safety regulations and how we manage the airfield and how we manage our terminal. That is our #1 goal. That said, we try to balance that also with customer service. We do that obviously with our TSA partners and our FAA partners the best we can. But if there's ever a doubt, our first objective is safety, as you can imagine.
Is it constant reevaluation?
It is. I mean, of course, regulations change too. Yeah. Both the security threats change, and of course, we adapt to those security threats. And then FAA, from an airfield safety perspective, technology changes on the airplane, which changes how the airfield, should be laid out, and we're constantly making those adjustments.
Visitors now have something pretty unusual for an airport that in fitting for Kentucky, and that's the Cork and Barrel Bourbon and Wine Shop, and that is what you call post-security check, right?
Yeah, this has been fantastic, honestly. We didn't have any idea how this was going to work in Lexington. When you put a retail operation on the other side of security, you're really limiting the number of people that can purchase from that. But it's such a well-known product in Kentucky, and I'll give it to Cork and Barrel. They just did a tremendous job with that store. It wasn't just for us to provide the product and hopefully they can make a profit, but we wanted to really reflect Kentucky, Central Kentucky, particularly in the Bourbon Trail. So we feel like that was a really nice addition to our terminal, and not only is it good, hopefully for them financially, but it's great for our community.
Going forward, anything we should know about? Any future plans?
We've got plenty of things going on. They're not necessarily as exciting and sexy as perhaps air service, but we've got projects going on all over the airfield. And what's good, I think, for our community, it's a big economic impact generator for our community. So got a lot of jobs and a lot of construction going on, and I think that's good for the community overall.
Eric Frankel, thanks for coming by. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And we hope you'll stay with us on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Candidate for Lexington Mayor Ronnie Bastin will be here next. We have some questions for him. We hope you'll stay here. Welcome back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We've been meeting the candidates for Lexington Mayor in what has turned out to be a crowded race. The day before the filing deadline, former Lexington Police Chief Ronnie Bastin jumped into the fray, and last week he kicked off his campaign. After his tenure as chief, Bastin was appointed Public Safety Commissioner, and he served in city government more than 33 years before stepping down just before making this race. Baston is obviously well positioned to talk about crime in the city, where murder and shooting rates are alarming right now. Baston has never run for public office before, but he reasons that he has the right kind of experience for the times. Ronnie Baston, we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to be here with you.
Well, you have been here before wearing a badge and a gun when you were chief, and you've served in this capacity overseeing public safety. But how does it feel now to be in the political fray?
Well, it's different. It's definitely different than other positions I've been in, but you know, I've been talking to a lot of folks, and the response has been overwhelming. I'm very excited about this.
How do they? What are they saying to you?
They're saying you're the right guy for the job. You have the skill sets that we need. You have character. You have a history of transparency, and you know, we're excited about you running and leading the city.
Former Chief Anthony Beatty ran for mayor 4 years ago. He lost. He thought it was a great learning experience. He considered it again. Is it a difficult transition, though, maybe from an administrative job at City Hall to really literally getting out and campaigning in the community? Well,
there's some differences I've found already that I'm learning. You know, in the position before, I didn't have to ask people for money to support me. And that's been a big learning curve for me. I hadn't asked anyone for a dollar ever. But I realize now that's important, that people believe in what you stand for and the ideas you have and the ideas to move Lexington forward. And it's necessary to ask your friends and folks that would support you in that endeavor.
When you're raising money, do you worry what strings might come attached to the money?
Well, some people may have expectations, but you know, I come from an environment where there can't be strings attached. And I want to be listened to. I want to listen to people and be accessible, but I'm not willing to make promises in return for contributions.
And so if someone were to ask you that, you just simply walk away?
Absolutely. I'd explain my position.
Did you think about any kind of intermediate step in politics before running for the top job at City Hall?
I've looked at that and thought about it over time, but I think the opportunity is right now for me to bring my skill sets and history of success to lead Lexington. And I think that's what people are excited about, and that's what they're saying as I talk to them.
Let's talk about where the city is. The crime rate is alarming to Lexingtonians, and even to those outside Lexington, the image beyond the city's boundaries. How concerned are you about the problem and the perceptions?
Well, Lexington's a great city, but we're not without challenges. Crime is an issue that's very near and dear to me. I'm concerned. I want to make sure that we take necessary steps to control crime and have the best quality of life that we can for our citizens. I feel positioned in this race as the candidate who has the most experience. There's literally, I'm not aware of a street in Lexington that I haven't driven on at some time, frequently in the middle of the night. And so I understand what real problems are and the people have and concerns. So I have a three-part plan that I want to roll out when elected as mayor. I want to fully fund and support the recent initiative, the One Lexington initiative, which takes a comprehensive look at crime and dealing with problems within the community that are related to violence and crime. I'm really wired into that, and I was one of the architects with that program. The other thing I want to do is relaunch an initiative that we launched when I was police chief, the We Care movement. We had issues in the Georgetown Street area, and I walked the neighborhoods and knocked on doors and talked to people. They were afraid to come out on their porches and enjoy the summertime evenings. And I walked away from that after 2 days of knocking on doors, knowing that I couldn't leave that area. And we rallied some folks to collaborate with, and we went in and really invested in the neighborhood, cut grass, cleaned up. We repaired bullet holes in some elderly folks' homes that had been there, you know, in the middle of a gunfight. And you know, I just saw how hope can be reinstilled in a community and how important that is. The third thing I want to do is work with our new police chief, Lawrence Weathers. Lawrence is someone I've invested in and watched his entire career. I have a tremendous amount of confidence in him. I know that I can work with him and use my experience to help him to allocate resources properly and really put the focus, community policing focus on that we need to have.
This crime wave, is it completely a policing issue, or does the whole community need to get involved in some way?
It's a community issue, and that's why I'm so excited about this One Lexington initiative. It not only looks at what government is doing and can do, but what others who are doing programs that are related to juvenile violence and crime, and trying to give the 30,000-foot view of looking over that, filling holes where there are gaps, reducing redundancies and those kinds of things, and really pulling together the community as one to combat this.
You have the benefit of that experience and the ability to tell that to the voters out there, having been the chief and having these ideas. Do you anticipate that some of your 6 opponents in this race might also say, well, you were public service safety commissioner during the time when some of these things were becoming tough?
Well, I'm sure they will. But crime is a very complicated issue. I know that, having studied it and lived it and been on the front line for 34 years. The thing we have to be careful about is voters need to know that there's not a silver bullet or a Band-Aid that's going to fix this immediately. These problems have tentacles that go into a lot of areas, and unless we address the root causes, we're always going to be struggling with the symptoms.
What, from just a personality standpoint, what would you bring to this job in terms of how do you approach situations? You know, a crisis can come through the door quickly. There can be controversy. There can be an employee who embarrasses the city and you have to take action. How do you approach things like that?
Well, that's been a big part of my life and the career that I've had. I'm a problem solver, and I would approach problems and challenges that we have in the community like I have with many of the things that I've dealt with and had success with in my career. You have to identify what the issue is, talk to a lot of people, listen, find out what the potential alternatives are or choices that you might have to address that, figure out a strategy of what you're going to choose and how you're going to implement the problem, and then follow it and make sure that what you did and how you implemented it is actually working. I don't have all the answers to all the problems in the community, but I've had success getting people together who can find solutions and recognizing a good idea when I hear one.
Do you think Lexington benefits by this being a nonpartisan position, that people do not dig in behind the positions of parties that may be taken on the national or state level and think that they just have to step in line, as sometimes some lawmakers do?
I think that's true. I think local politics is different. Sometimes we like to think of it maybe as being similar to national politics or state politics, but local politics have to represent the community. We have to remember always that the community is made up of people with real problems, and that's what local government exists for. Sometimes our focus gets on things other than people and helping people to deal with some of the issues that they have and increasing their quality of life. So I want to find that right balance between people and politics, or people and projects and those kinds of things.
Let's talk about some other issues. Lexington is a beautiful city, always trying to find that balance, though, between preservation and growth. How would you approach growth when developers say they need to open up more areas for residential space to make housing more affordable, or for commercial growth that they say makes sense and would add to the coffers of the city? But at the same time, you look out there and you see those beautiful horse farms and wonder what you're doing.
Well, that can be a divisive issue in the community. I know there are people that are very passionate on both sides of that issue. I think that we have to be realistic in what we do, and we have to have folks at the table. I've had success bringing people together involving issues that have a lot of passion on both sides of the table, but I've had success getting people in the same room and starting a conversation that can help move things forward. And that's what I would hope to do with this issue. I'm really a smart growth person. I believe in protecting the treasure that we have, this beautiful piece of landscape that we've been blessed with. I know the importance of that, and I don't want to destroy that. I want that to be there for your children and my children. But at the same time, saying zero growth or absolutely no growth could send a message that Lexington and Fayette County is not open for business and our economy might not thrive. So we have to find the right balance for that. I think smart growth, that platform is the right way to go.
Do you have a position on the urban services boundary and whether that should be expanded?
I do. I've looked at that, and I know council and mayor recently took that issue up, and there's a direction now for the next few years. And so we're committed to the decisions that they've made. But I think we have to look at some of the agricultural land that we have that could be developed if we get the right opportunity that wants to come to Lexington, one that we have a conversation about. And we look at things like, how could this change our rural landscape, or what impact it could have? It would have to be the right opportunity, but I wouldn't say no to exploring opportunities.
A slow, deliberate kind of...
Absolutely, absolutely.
Is that what I'm getting from you? All right, we are with Ronnie Baston, candidate for Lexington Mayor. We have some more questions for him, and we'll be back on Kentucky Newsmakers in a moment. We welcome you back to Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. We're visiting with Ronnie Baston, one of 7 candidates for Lexington Mayor, and we're, of course, the subject of that May primary, and then they'll be eliminated down. There'll be 2 finalists who'll go forward to November. It's a crowded field.
It is.
Expect that?
Well, I didn't know what the field was going to look like, but we're prepared to move forward with it.
Tell us how you got to Lexington. You know, it's very interesting. I think you're trying to go for the trifecta here, because we had 2 mayors from Barron County over the last decade, and you hope to be the 3rd.
Well, that's true, and you know, we've had some great leaders here in Fayette County, from Barron County, and you know, I don't know if there's something in the water there or what it is. I've had a lot of people that have had theories about that, but I'm just honored to have the opportunity to move into a leadership role here in Lexington.
You're one of these who came to UK and stayed, right?
I came to UK in 1975. I was recruited by a person at the University of Kentucky that I still keep up with today, and loved Lexington, met my wife, decided that there was nowhere else I wanted to be except Lexington. We've lived here and raised our family. We're all into Lexington and service to this community, and the university has been a big part of our life as well.
The homelessness issue has proven to be an elusive one to deal with in Lexington. More people on the streets probably here than in Louisville, which has twice the population. All kinds of strategies have been tried or are being tried. Do you have an idea of how to improve the situation?
Well, I don't have the answer to the problem, Bill, but I know that we've made good strides so far. I feel like we have. I think we have to not rest on our laurels. I think we have to continuously look at ways to improve the situation and collaborate. I've had success building relationships with people in all sorts of situations, and that's what I want to do here. I want to build relationships with and listen to folks, stakeholders within the whole issue of homelessness, to see what opportunities we can find and how we can collaborate to do a better job with our homeless.
The economy is taking off around the country. Lexington is really dependent on that occupational and net profits tax as the underpinnings of its finances. Is that enough to keep city government afloat?
Well, it's the system that we have, and it's a system that we can work with, I think. One of the keys to that is job growth and increasing job skills within the workforce that we have now, so that they can earn higher wages and pay a higher amount of tax in as a result of that. And that's part of the basic philosophy that I have for economic development, is a strong workforce development program. We're celebrating a 3% unemployment rate right now, and that's something that we have to be careful about. It's a good thing, but some of the folks that are counted as working in that 3% are not doing real well. And so we have to set up a system so that they can earn their way into higher paying jobs and develop skill sets. And we need to figure out what that is and what that's going to require and how we can partner to do that.
The Kentucky League of Cities, which is based here in Lexington, points out that smaller cities have the option of a restaurant tax, but Kentucky's larger cities, Lexington, Louisville, even Richmond, some of the larger towns, do not have that option. Are you for the cities having the option of having a restaurant tax to provide revenue?
I think that option is a good option. It should be a local option. We should have the ability to decide what our citizens want and what they're willing to fund and how they're willing to fund it. So I would support that.
This is a 7-person field, as we've said, and the interesting thing is you about all know each other. So what kind of campaign do you anticipate before the May primary does whittle it down from 7 to 2?
Well, I would hope that we all agree to run a very solid campaign that isn't negative. We want to point out our differences and what we each bring to the table, but I don't think you win anything by talking bad about someone else, and that's what I hope that I see in this campaign. Personally, I've given up a job and given up quite a bit to enter into this race. That's how strongly I feel about it. So I'm going to knock on doors, and I'm going to be out there working hard every day, all day.
And you say it doesn't, so far, it's come natural to you to do that.
Well, I like people, and that's going to be a big focus of who I am and how I lead. And I think people get overlooked sometimes with government. So absolutely, I'm going to enjoy getting out and talking to people and finding out what they think government can do to help them and their families grow and thrive.
Do you anticipate a lot of forums along the way where voters can maybe get their questions to you?
I'm sure there will be, and I'm looking for opportunities to get out and talk to people. I love people. You know, the most positive part of this experience is going to be to make some new friends and meet new people.
All right, Ronnie Baston, thank you so much for coming, candidate for mayor of Lexington. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning, on WKYT Mid-Morning at 10, and on WKYT News at noon. Updates always on WKYT.com. You make it a good week ahead.